discuss something. So the room is here courtesy of the East Coast Reflector. And many of us get together at 3:30 in the afternoon for afternoon coffee. We do our logging from this room, run our nets, the morning brew, and so forth. And we're usually on here at 9 o'clock after the morning brew, and just kind of settle some world problems and iron out any bugs that need to be ironed for the day. So,
Sir, I don't want to be rude. Apparently, though, my cell phone will not allow me to put my call site on there. I just want you to know I'm not ignoring you. I just can't seem to do it on a cell phone.
well, make you a deal. You tell us your call sign and you'll be good for the night.
Okay. KQ4 MRE. That's Kilo Quebec 4, meals ready to eat.
All right. As long as Vicky's got that, we're in good shape.
Okay, Dave Winters.
All
Wow,
right,
that was fast.
all right. We're 79 and growing here. I would also ask everybody to please mute themselves. And however Jonathan wants to take questions or whatever, I'm going to turn it over to you when we get set here, Jonathan. You can do whatever you want. This is certainly not your first rodeo.
I do have slides, if it's okay, if I can share my screen.
Absolutely. And like I said, with your permission, we're going to record.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. Let me
Okay.
get that ready. Fine. You. All right.
Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody. What a nice turnout tonight. Looks like 82 people on my screen here. And we're delighted to have Jonathan Taylor, K1RDF, the inventor of Echolink, join us tonight for a presentation and a Q&A afterward. And I'm going to turn the program over to him, and we'll have a few words after we're done here. So we're all ears, Jonathan. Thank you again for coming.
Okay, Dick. Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm coming to you from Ridgefield, Connecticut, in the southwestern corner of Connecticut. And I've been here for just about 25 years, I guess, and on and off activity with amateur radio. My favorite mode still is CW, and I get on HF occasionally from here, occasionally from HF Mobile, including HF Mobile CW. But some time ago, I got involved with writing software for amateur radio and developed an app known as Echolink. And the title of this presentation is Internet Linking for Amateur Radio, but as you might imagine, it's mostly about Echolink and some of the various capabilities of that. I'll mention some of the other systems as well, especially to the degree that they fit in. Now, let me just get set up here to share my screen. I do have a few slides, and we'll see if this works. Okay, well, hopefully you're seeing that. So internet linking for amateur radio. First of all, a definition of internet voice gateways. And these are systems like Echolink and IRLP and AllStar and so on that let amateur radio stations connect to each other over the internet. In other words, a hybrid of RF and internet technologies. And definitely not considered to be substitutes or simulators for amateur radio. These are enhancements to the amateur radio systems that we have in place. Some examples of these, as I mentioned, are Echolink, IRLP, the Internet Radio Linking Project, the AllStar Link Network, and also systems that have, internet linking built in, integrated with it, integrated digital systems, such as those capabilities built into DStar and DMR and so on, which I won't be talking about tonight, but more on the analog side. And there are, of course, systems that are hybrids of more than one VoIP system. Some nodes support connections over more than one. Selected IRLP reflectors, as an example, and especially this one, the Reflector 9050. The East Coast Reflector supports both Echolink and IRLP connections simultaneously. There is a package known as EchoIRLP, which is an add-on of scripts and binaries to an existing IRLP node, which give it the capability of accepting and connecting to Echolink as well. And there's also the combination of Asterisk, the open source PBX, with a application called AppRpt and the Echolink channel driver, which will allow you to set up an Echolink compatible node using that combination of software as well. And there are various modes to Echolink. Excuse me. Many of us have tried only one or the other and may not be familiar with the others, but the one that most of us are immediately familiar with is remote access to repeaters. If you have the Echolink software installed on a desktop or laptop computer or a mobile device that has basically, audio input and output, microphone and speakers, and an internet connection, and the Echolink software, the Echolink app, you have access to connect to any repeater anywhere in the world, which is on the network, just by exchanging packets over the internet and using the remote node as a gateway into the remote repeater site. In this case, the typical configuration is that the node has an FM transceiver tuned to the frequency pair of the repeater. In some cases, of course, the equipment is at the repeater site and connected directly to the controller. But this allows, portable or, any station that has internet access, the ability to communicate with anybody who's in range of the selected repeater. A second mode is simplex RF linking, where we have a node in two locations around the world, which is tuned to a simplex channel, and usually an FM simplex channel, and provides sort of like a wormhole between those two nodes at the time they're connected, so that mobile and portable stations that are in range of one node have access to mobile and portable stations in range of the other. And the nice thing about this is that it's on demand. These are not permanent links typically set up. These are things that can be activated for any particular reason, either because it's somebody you want to talk to on the other side of the world, or because there's a specific net or a specific emergency requirement in place for this, connecting this wormhole together. You can also basically extend the idea to have the, input and output frequency pair of a repeater at both ends, so that you are essentially creating an on-demand link between repeaters anywhere in the world over the internet, again, for the same reasons. And of course, it doesn't have to be one-to-one. There can be more than one station, more than one node as part of the QSO. In this case, we have, three nodes operating on repeater channels: Norwalk, Connecticut; Danbury, Connecticut; Waterbury, Connecticut. These are three towns in my neighborhood here. And the idea here is that without any prearrangement between the clubs that operate these repeaters or any microwave or UHF links, these three repeaters can be linked to each other for a certain period of time and providing coverage across everybody who's in range of any of those machines. So how does this all work? Those of you who are more technically inclined probably already know this, but I'll make sure I cover it. And the first is to realize that with digital audio, a sound card is essentially an analog to digital converter, which operates at audio frequencies. So it converts an audio frequency signal into a stream of binary data, a stream of bits, and vice versa, converting a stream of binary data into an analog and audio frequency signal. The analog data is sampled at twice the highest frequency of interest, the Nyquist frequency, and essentially each sample is being converted by the sound card into a number, which is proportional to the amplitude or the voltage at the input, and the other way around, of course. And one way to sort of test this out is to connect a microphone and amplifier into a scope, an oscilloscope, set it for a fairly slow sweep speed. And what we're looking at here is the envelope, the waveform of somebody speaking the letter A. And of course, on the y-axis, we have amplitude, and on the x-axis, time. This is 350 milliseconds left to right. And that's what the letter A looks like in a scope. The way the sound card looks at this is a magnified view, zooming in on this so that we have just 3 milliseconds from left to right. We're looking at this the way the sound card looks at it. 24 samples, equally spaced. This is if you're sampling at 8 kilohertz, and a series of amplitudes or voltages at the input, each of which is converted into a binary digit. And so a basic VoIP system consists of two computers that have some kind of digital connection between them, such as the internet, and then a sound card at each end, so that audio input at one side gets converted to a stream of bits, which is sent over the internet to the other side, and that gets converted back into an audio signal on the output. You connect it both directions for either full duplex or half duplex. And then the trick here is to connect an amateur transceiver to both ends. So you've created not just an audio connection over the internet, but actually an RF gateway over the internet. And that's essentially what these systems look like in terms of the block diagram. I call this RF for the last mile. The idea is that we're not here competing with the internet with our amateur radio technology. We're using each of these communications technologies to a good advantage. The internet for us gives us this reliable, addressable, and typically long-haul path between the nodes, taking the power of the internet and internet protocols. The nodes themselves give us this internet to RF gateway, as I've just described, and then VHF, UHF locally cover the last mile between the nodes and the mobile stations. So this entire stack is a way of enhancing the abilities of amateur radio using the internet. Of course, Echolink is a popular system. It's been around for about 22 years now. There are about 360,000 registered users worldwide, all of whom have had, call sign validated over the years. IRLP has about roughly 1,000 active nodes on the system. It's become fairly stable. And as I mentioned before, the combination of AppRpt and Asterisk and the AllStar link system gives you another platform possibility, which has lots of flexible customization capabilities and has been growing very rapidly. For example, it can be used to set up, custom or dedicated links between nodes. Echolink is not an adaptation of some other system. It actually was created from the ground up with amateur radio in mind. All the software is original and created specifically for the purpose of amateur radio. First version came out just over 22 years ago, 22 and a half years ago, I guess. It's the same the same month that one of my children was born, so I can always remember that. And it's growing still. Back in the day, we were getting about 250 new users every 24 hours. Now that's tapered off a bit, but still getting about 60 new validations every day. And there are 4 platform editions now, Windows, iOS, Android, and web. And as I mentioned, 4 or 5 third-party offerings as well, all participating on this network. I talked before about the 2 types of nodes, the PC or mobile app user, which is basically the software platform plus an internet connection and some audio input and output device, or an RF link or a gateway node, which consists of a transceiver and some kind of linking interface between the transceiver and the computer, and of course an internet connection, which provides then a gateway to the RF world. This is what Echolink looks like as a PC user. If you're running Windows and download the Echolink software from ecolink.org and get it up and running, it's got a pretty typical Windows user interface. Multiple panes, some of which are dockable and resizable. And when you're validated and logged in, it's showing you really the list of all the other nodes that are logged into the system at the same time, any of which can be clicked on to connect to. At the bottom, you have an audio level meter, and at the right, some text information, including a text chat box for sending and receiving text messages. Inside of all this it's a monolithic application, but it has lots of pieces inside of it. The user interface, as with any typical desktop application, but then a lot of other modules that are doing various things, including certain kinds of digital signal processing, DTMF decoding and software, a fully functional web server, which functions as a wireline control link. So lots going on inside the software. And there have been some changes. The software was stable for a long time, and just about 3 years ago, I released version 2.3, which had a number of enhancements, the most noticeable of which is an improvement in the audio quality, using 16-bit audio instead of 8-bit audio, reflecting the fact that just about every sound card made in the last 15 years supports at least 16-bit audio. The ability to call CQ, which I'll talk about in a minute, and some other things, including support for other types of interface devices and larger monitors and different wave and audio file formats. And then there is a 2.4 version in the works, which is just beginning testing now. This is essentially similar to the 2.3, but has a couple of new features having to do with setting up your own network. A more robust network test utility, which tells you a lot about your current firewall and router setup, and also finally support for UPnP, Universal Plug and Play, which is a protocol that's been around for a while that helps you discover and in some cases configure routers that are on your local network if they're enabled for that. I mentioned the CQ feature, and this came out in version, I guess it was 2.3, which is called CQ. One of the comments I've heard from longtime users on Echolink is that unlike the early days when there's lots and lots of activity and not very many nodes, now there's lots of nodes and not nearly as much activity. And it can be difficult sometimes to find a QSO. The call CQ feature, which is supported actually in all 4 platforms now, gives you the ability to essentially call CQ by putting in a series of preferences about your language, about countries you'd like to communicate with, what types of nodes you want to connect to, and to put you basically into a queue or a list, and to match you up with any other users who are calling CQ that have matching preferences. And the idea is that when any such station comes online, it will automatically connect the two of you so you can have a QSL. This is also supported in the sysop version of the software through DTMF commands to initiate and terminate a CQ connection. And it gets a fair amount of activity. There's actually a status page on the website which shows you the CQ activity. Interfacing with Echolink is fairly straightforward. Even in the earliest days, it's been relying upon the serial port of the PC, using the status signals, the status pins on that port, similar to many other sound card software, which uses that for carrier detect and for push to talk. So that by connecting a simple sound card interface to the PC and to a transceiver, you've set up what you need for an RF node, a sysop gateway. There are various interfaces available for this. There are special purpose linking interfaces, some of which are still available, which actually have things like a hardware-based DTMF decoder built into them. There are generic sound card interfaces which work with Echolink, things in sort of the Rig Blaster family. And of course, there are certain external audio devices. These have become a lot more popular because they plug into a USB port and provide not just control, but also the actual audio chip external to the PC. Things like the SignalLink USB or the URI device. This is what the URI looks like. It's based upon a single chip that provides both control signals, but also audio input and output. This has been available for a long time with the AppRpt software, and then beginning in version 2.3 of Echolink was also available for Echolink. And it's fairly easy to set up. You can see the quarter there for comparative size. And something a little bit like that is the SignalLink USB, which is essentially an external sound card that has Vox capability. These are very popular for people who are running HF digital modes, but it will also work with Echolink. And one of the enhancements recently to Echolink was to actually send a subaudible tone. It had the option of sending a subaudible tone during transmit, which helps keep the Vox open on this device. So you don't have to worry about getting clipped at the beginning or end of a transmission. So this is a very straightforward, easy to install sort of plug and play kind of device if you're setting up a gateway node for Echolink. Quite a while ago, Kenwood released a transceiver that had Echolink sysop capability built in. This is the TM-V71A, and also the TM-D710 has the same capability. And just by adding a Kenwood cable set, which I think is called the PG5H, you can connect this directly to a PC and have Echolink sysop capability without the requirement for adding an additional linking interface. The server architecture behind the scenes consists of a number of servers sitting in the cloud, and it's actually using a combination of the Amazon AWS cloud and Oracle's cloud with various servers around the world, all of which replicate to each other. And contrary to popular belief, the actual packets when you're communicating with somebody on an Echolink connection actually go to peer-to-peer. They don't go through a server. The servers are primarily used for a combination of addressing, that is, keeping track of the list of nodes on the system, and also for managing security. But once the QSO is established, and this is good for scale, all the conversations, all the packets are going directly from one node to the other over the internet. One of the concepts we've had since the very beginning is positive validation. There's been a lot of concern, especially in the original days, to make sure that every single person who's operating on the Echolink system is a duly licensed amateur, operating using his or her own call sign. So the policy is that proof of license and identity are required for every new user, and this is part of our validation system. Fortunately, it's fairly easy to get validated if you're a new user. If you are in the US, you have a couple of options, one of which is to upload a license copy that is downloaded from the FCC website. This is the actual PDF document of your official copy of your license. Or if you happen to have a credit card that has the same billing address as your FCC mailing address, you can use that as a method of validation. If you're outside of the US, we also accept scans or faxes of license documents. And one of the interesting problems we have is that there is no universal format for amateur radio license documents around the world. Every single country is different, without exception. We get everything from online PDF documents from various countries like the UK and Canada to, sometimes handwritten licenses in certain third world countries. And we've been have a fair amount of experience in recognizing what's a legitimate license document. The other requirement is if you're in a country where license renewals are required fairly frequently, we do require in every country that your license still be valid, that it hasn't expired. This is to avoid a problem where people allow their licenses to lapse, yet are still using VoIP as a substitute for amateur radio, which is really not a good situation. A little bit about the mobile computing platform. We talk about cell phones in our pockets and our iOS and Android devices, but it's really almost not fair to call them phones. As you know, they really are mobile computers. They have a fair amount of computing capability in them and also have lots of radios in them, Bluetooth, GPS, cellular, Wi-Fi. And these devices, of course, also have pretty good graphics and multimedia capability. I was giving a talk about Echolink about, I don't know, maybe about 15 years ago to a group nearby. And after discussing the Windows software, somebody in the audience held up a mobile device and said, "You think you could put Echolink on this thing?" And I must say, had never really occurred to me at that time, since it wasn't common to have things deployed on the mobile devices. But fortunately, we've been able to put together both Echolink for Android and Echolink for iOS. These screenshots are a little bit out of date, but they show the basic capabilities of Echolink on these two platforms. It really is a subset of what's available in the Windows software, and it is really currently only in single user mode. But you have the same basic capabilities that you have on the Windows software in single user mode, where you can see a list of other nodes connected and have the ability to tap on them and connect to them. Echolink's also available for iPhone and also for iPad. In fact, the iPad edition of Echolink shows a map of the sysop nodes that are on the system, and you can actually zoom in on the map and see their locations as well. It also features a retro VU meter at the bottom of the screen. And then just earlier this year came a fourth platform for Echolink, which is Echolink Web. And this is a fully functional edition of single user mode that operates completely inside of a web browser. So there isn't any software to download or install. One of the advantages of this is not only is it sort of a quick and dirty way to get online from wherever you happen to have a computer, but it also helps solve the cross-platform question. If you're running, for example, a Mac, or if you're running Linux on the desktop, this gives you a quick solution to get onto the Echolink network just by going to a certain URL, which is webapp.ecolink.org. This will probably undergo some changes. The user interface is pretty basic now, but it is fully functional and gets a fair amount of usage. One of the things that's changed over the years is the way we connect to the internet. Many of us remember back in the 1990s and in the early 2000s that the primary means of getting online on the internet was through a dial-up modem. In fact, the codec that Echolink uses was originally designed to work over 14.4 or 19.2 BPS dial-up modems. Things have changed since then. Two things that have changed are, first of all, the broad deployment of broadband connections, cable modem or even DSL connections that use a router in the home, that use some kind of a NAT router. And then even more recently has been the proliferation of other types of ISPs, such as satellite and cellular, which actually have shared addresses. But in any of these cases, UDP, the user datagram protocol, has always been the best internet protocol for multimedia and for VoIP. Unfortunately, it's not always firewall friendly. And one of the original design decisions with Echolink was to use fixed port numbers. And these things cause a problem for people who are sitting behind routers that they're not able to control, such as if you're in a public hotspot in a coffee shop or an airport. One solution to this is to take advantage of Echolink's proxy network. There are Echolink proxies deployed all over the world by people who are fortunate enough to be donating the bandwidth. And this really is the best option for being able to get onto the system if you're sitting behind a router that you aren't able to configure. If you're using a mobile device, there is a variation on that which uses all UDP, which works better on mobile, which are called relay servers. So by default, if you're running the Echolink app on iOS or Android, you'll be running through the network of relay servers around the world. This is what the proxy looks like. It's basically taking the networking stack out of the software and moving it to another location, which has better internet access. The relay servers are a little bit like that, but they use entirely UDP rather than TCP for their proxy connections. And this has the ability actually to scale pretty well and to have a single relay be used for multiple clients at the same time. And what's happened now is a lot more of us are connecting to the internet using CGNAT providers. Cellular and satellite ISPs are typically not even dispensing you your own internet address when you connect. You're using some kind of a shared address, similar to having two people in the same household. And this means that port forwarding is not possible. It's not possible to have a router which you can go into and configure to forward the ports that are required for good Echolink operation. For this situation, you either have the option of using a proxy or using a VPN service. And a lot of people have begun using this, as long as you choose a VPN service that supports port forwarding. And sometimes that's an extra cost option. One question I often get is how this is all funded through, being able to support the cost of operating the addressing servers and the other systems, such as the database. It's through a system called vanity node numbers. When you sign on to Echolink, you're assigned a randomly assigned 6-digit node number. However, you have the option of choosing a 4- or 5-digit number, and for a certain cost, and those proceeds substantially offset the monthly hosting costs of operating the Echolink system. And the website for Echolink is www.ecolink.org. And I'll stop sharing my screen now and return back to the forum. And I guess I'm ready to take any questions you might have.
Hi, this is Michael KF4BOG, and I've been using Echolink for a while, but the one thing that I'm kind of discouraged about it is that if you have to install it on a new computer, it doesn't save who you have added into your favorites list. Once again, this is on the computer side. Whereas if you go to the web portal that you have created, it actually saves the favorites on the web portal side of it. Why does the software not do this? And are you planning to make a fix for this?
That's
Thank
a
you.
great question. And yes, you point out the fact that the favorites list is considered part of the local software configuration on the Windows edition and actually on the mobile editions as well. And it would be an enhancement for it to be saved in the cloud the same way that the favorites are saved on the web app. I think that would be a great update, especially since more and more people are using more than one edition of the software and moving from one to the other. Or, as you point out, if you're installing on a new computer. So that's a great suggestion.
Hey, John, I got one for you.
Question. I got a question about sound. Basically, I know you showed the device that you could boost the sound. Like, I believe you could plug in like a mic and speaker, but there is a way through software to boost the sound too, like so that you could have it like 110% sound. I was wondering if there's a way you could do that with the software so that we don't have to plug in a sound booster.
So I'm not sure what the sound booster is. On Windows, of course, you have the ability to manually set the microphone gain, and of course the speaker volume. When people ask me what kind of device to use in single user mode, I almost always recommend a USB headset, so you can get you want to get the microphone right in front of you, so you don't sound echoey when you're more than a couple feet away from the microphone. On the mobile devices, there isn't any API that allows you to control the microphone gain on iOS and Android devices. In place of that, in the Android software, there is what looks like a microphone gain setting in the app, in the settings for the app. And it really is, it's sort of the audio equivalent of digital zoom. It doesn't really increase the gain on the input. It just multiplies the amplitudes of the packets going out. So it also raises the noise floor. But it does help with certain situations when you have low audio. I hope
Okay.
that answers your question.
Yeah, and I also have another question. It has to do with the messaging. Like let's say if I want to send let's say if I want to send a message to everybody on a certain repeater, could I just message the repeater and like everyone on the repeater could look at the message? Or
Yeah,
what's
so
the messaging that
it's a great question. So the text chat capability is really for people who are looking at a screen, of course. There isn't any capability to send a text message in a way that it'll be voiced to the people who are listening to the repeater, which actually might be fortunate that it doesn't work that way. But yeah, you need to be aware that whenever you're sending a text message on any VoIP system, it's really only going to be visible to people who have a screen in front of them.
Hey, John, I have a question for you. So on Echolink, we use Echolink through AllStar quite a bit, and we get a notification a lot because we have a lot of co-located equipment that you can't have an Echolink -L and -R on the same public IP address.
Yeah.
Could you explain the reasoning behind that? Just because some people, we have like a repeater at the site and we have a simplex node on the same internet connection at the same site, and it's just I've just always wondered why.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's sort of for historical reasons, partly. Every node needs the ability to not only initiate a connection, but also to accept one. In that sense, it functions like a server. So it needs to be addressable from the internet. And since Echolink uses fixed port numbers, a fixed port number pair for its UDP packets, it requires that every node that's logged into the system have a distinct, unique public IP address. Otherwise, it's not reachable. There are two solutions to that. One of them would be to support additional port numbers so that you could have two or more nodes sitting behind the same public IP address, but are listening on different port numbers. And that would have been clairvoyant thinking back in 2002 when the software was developed. It's extremely difficult, if virtually impossible, however, to add that capability in a way that doesn't break nodes on the system. The other solution is to use a VPN, which allows you to basically assign a different public IP address to a device that's on your network. So that, one device is using the existing router address and the other one is using a VPN address. Currently, those are the only two solutions for a sysop gateway, other than using a dedicated proxy.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Well, I know this is probably a sore subject, but any plans for IPv6? Because that would, if that was possible, it would get rid of all the port forwarding, at least on the residential layer. Businesses and whatnot usually use, shall we say, firewall appliances to do filtering. But for the average user, like for example, I've got fiber and I have a static IPv4 and a whole subnet of IPv6s. So is there any plans for supporting that?
So IPv6 would be great for those of you who are not familiar with it. A much larger address space that supports, billions and billions of devices theoretically, supported by all major ISPs now, usually alongside IPv4. And because it has such a huge address space, it doesn't require nearly as much network address translation or the way routers typically work. The problem with that is that, again, it becomes a breaking change. If we have nodes that support IPv6, they wouldn't be reachable by nodes that don't. And unfortunately, with so many different software devices in the network now, it's very difficult to roll out a change like that without creating really a parallel system.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm in. Hello?
I had something I wanted to add.
I definitely have a question.
I'd like to get in line too.
Let's start off with press.
Oh, okay, thank you. Good evening, Jonathan. Nice to see you again. I believe we met very briefly a couple of years ago at Ham Radio University, and you're looking fine as usual.
Hi,
Got a question. We seem to have a lot of, in the AllStar Echolink.conf, there are several server entries, and server 3 equals server4.echolink.org, for example. It constantly can't seem to connect to that. And oddly enough, even if I comment it out in the Echolink.conf, it still tries. What are our proper servers? Server 1 equals server1.echolink.org, and what are the proper servers that will smoothly work?
Well, you'll always get success with servers.echolink.org. That's an A record that has multiple IP entries, which represent all the active servers. There are 3 other active servers. One of them is in Australia, one's in Germany, and the other 2 are in the US. So it depends what your geographic location is if you wanted to access the ones closest to you. There are aliases. So if you're in the Northeast US, there's an alias called naeast.echolink.org, which is probably the best one to use.
So can I just put anything in server 1 equals, like naeast.echolink.org, and then?
Yeah, well, you're asking me about software, which I didn't write, so I don't know the answer to that.
I'm only looking to find out the server information.
Yeah.
Do you know if I'm allowed to put in only one entry? Because it seemed to me that when I got rid of the troublesome ones, everything didn't work anymore.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I'm not the author of that software, so I don't know exactly how that works, but you could certainly try it.
So naeast.echolink.org.
Yeah, if you're in the Northeast US, that's right.
Okay, Ron, I think you were next.
Yeah, I have a comment. It was to get around when you get a new computer, because recently I just got a new computer.
Yeah.
And I take the folder from my
old installation on the old computer under the documents and Echolink, and I replace it with the default folder on the new installation, and then everything migrates over. And that was an easy way to get everything back that I would have lost had I not done that.
Yeah, the favorites and the station information file are just text files, which are in the document/Echolink folder. That's probably what you're referring to. So if you wanted to move something over to a new PC and you wanted to save those two things, that's the easiest way to do that.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on that for that fella in there.
Yeah.
All right, I'm done.
Hey,
Chris?
Jonathan,
Yeah.
quick question. Within the app or configuration versus having the node number or the call sign with the first name. I'm being told for the call sign and first name that has to be configured in a server. Is that correct? Or you understand what I'm asking?
So which edition of the software are you talking about?
Oh, geez. It would,
Is this on Windows?
well, it was within an AllStar node.
Okay, so I don't know exactly how those nodes are configured. I assume it's in the echolink.conf file, but I couldn't tell you specifically where in that file those entries are put in.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
I have
Chris,
another.
Chris, did you have a question?
My question is, where and when did you come up with this amazing idea in your head?
Well, I can't take credit for that. Internet linking systems had been around for a few years before Echolink came out. There was an app called RepeaterPhone back in the late 90s, which some of you might have used.
I have it.
Yeah. Was it called RepeaterPhone? I think it was. So this is like, we're talking like 26 years ago or something.
Wow.
And then IRLP became really the first widely used VoIP amateur radio system, and that had been around since at least 99 or 2000. And then there was an app called iLink, which was released, I think, in 2001, which ended up being sort of a precursor to Echolink. What happened with iLink was that the gentleman who had released it sort of stopped supporting it. And the problem was it was getting a tremendous amount of growth. And I think there was some frustration because there wasn't any support behind that.
Got it.
Yeah, I saw that as an opportunity to provide a more supportable edition of it and also to spruce up the user interface. So in some ways, Echolink was really just the next generation of iLink. So I can't take credit for the idea.
All right. Thank you for your honesty, sir.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Could I ask another question?
Yeah.
You mentioned proxy servers. I do remember way back in the mid 2010s, when I used Echolink. It was before I had my new call sign. I had to use a proxy server because I was behind somebody else's router. If I decided to set up a proxy server for other people to use when I have extra bandwidth available, how many users can a proxy server handle? Is it just one at a time, or could there be multiple users, and does it do any sort of NAT?
So the way the proxy works for Echolink is it supports only one user at a time, because again, it has its only one external IP address. There is a addition of the proxy, which can very efficiently function as multiple proxies at the same time if you have the ability to bind to multiple public addresses on the same machine. And there are a number of these that have been set up using the 44 net, the 44 address space, which is dedicated to amateur radio purposes. So there are some hams who have provided a whole set of 16, 32, 64 simultaneous proxies just by running this edition of the proxy software, which is bound to multiple IP addresses. Hopefully that answers the question.
Well, I don't quite get, you said, how many bit address space was for ham radio? What was that number?
Yeah, so there is something called the 44 net, which is addresses that begin with 44 dot something. It used to be an entire block of addresses, 44.x.y.z. Some of it has been sold off, but most of it still is dedicated to amateur radio use. And it's possible to request a allocation of a block of addresses in that space if you're anticipating setting up a server for some kind of amateur radio purpose. And some folks who have set up Echolink proxies have done exactly that.
All right, like for example, at where my shop is,
Yeah.
I have a block of 5 static IPs, plus of course the gateway could also be used as well.
Yeah.
It's Comcast. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
So basically, I could take one machine as long as I route the correct port numbers to different IPs. Basically, I could just put one NIC card, give it multiple IPs in that range, and it'd be a little bit tricky with the router, but that would be one way to do it, to do like 5 people, right?
Well, you'd have to, if you're talking about getting that address space in that 44 address space, you'd have to get in touch with, you're not.
No, I was talking about at my shop.
Yeah, at your shop.
I'm paying for 5 separate IP addresses.
Yes, okay.
And
So
none of them use Echolink, but I could
Okay.
make that happen.
That's right. That's right. Now you'd have to make sure that your network configuration allowed you to bind all of those public IPs to the same NIC card. In other words, it wouldn't be sitting behind a NAT router in that case. So, but yes, theoretically you could do that.
Yeah, okay, then that presents another problem, but I don't want to tie up the meeting with that. I'll
Okay.
go down that rabbit hole.
Good luck.
All right, we got Rich, WB.
I have a
3.
question.
Is it my turn, Rich?
Yeah, go ahead,
Go
Rich.
ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. Excellent presentation. So here's my use case. Often I'm using Echolink on my Android phone, and I have an occasional sked with a friend also using Echolink on his Android phone. I don't know if it's relevant, but I'm in the United States and he's not. But be that as it may, usually we start off in our settings both in direct mode, and quite often it works famously and fabulously. But occasionally we both see we're both online on Echolink, and yet the connection can't be made. And so then we're sort of scrounging. Do we switch from direct mode to relay mode, or to public proxy mode, or to custom proxy mode? And we're sort of at a loss as to what the protocol is for trying to actually establish communication when it doesn't work in direct mode. And sometimes he's out walking the streets somewhere with his phone. And usually I'm static, but sometimes I'm out and about as well. So if you could possibly address that and tell us, and one follow-up, do we both need to, in our settings, be in the same mode?
Okay, that's a great question. I'm glad you raised this. There's a lot of misunderstandings about this. The first rule of the settings in the Android or the iOS apps is don't use direct mode unless you have gone through the effort to configure your router for port forwarding. Direct mode is just to be avoided. In fact, I've considered removing it from future editions of the software. The problem is that when you're using an Android or iOS device, you're almost always sitting behind some kind of a routed or CGNATed connection, which will make it very difficult to establish a connection. So always use either relay or public proxy mode. Relay is the default mode, and that actually is optimized for mobile devices which may have sort of flaky networking and need to do everything over UDP. One limitation of the relay mode, however, is that you can initiate a connection, but you cannot receive one. That's because of the architecture of the relay servers and the way they share addresses. So if you are connecting from one mobile device to another, you cannot do it if both of you are in relay mode. One or both of you needs to be in public proxy mode. So that's what I would recommend. If relay mode isn't working for you, switch to public proxy.
That is a great solution, and we never would have come up with it on our own. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rich. Go ahead, Edward.
Yeah, hi, Jonathan. I love Echolink, and it's opened up new horizons for me. One of the issues I was having is I have a very hybrid computer system with a podcast mic. And if I bridge Ethernet and Wi-Fi, I seem to have clarity problems on Echolink. And I've set that up for the research in that I'm doing on my system. So I had to turn that off in order to get the clarity back. Do you have any suggestions on that over?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by you're bridging Ethernet and Wi-Fi. Do you have two different IPs on the same computer?
Negative. In this my computer, I got 4 Ethernet cards and 2
Yeah.
Wi-Fi cards.
Yeah.
So what I was doing is I was creating a bridge. So if the Ethernet's busy doing something, the Wi-Fi would take over, or if the Wi-Fi is busy, the Ethernet would take over.
Oh, okay.
And when I did that, it caused clarity issues for communication. So once I turned that bridging off, everything went back to normal.
Yeah, I can just, I can't tell you for sure what's happening. There's sometimes a situation where a node's IP address changes rapidly. And that can happen sometimes if you have a failover scenario between two different ISPs. And that's very bad for any VoIP system because the peer that you're talking to expects you to be reachable at a certain address. And if that address changes in the middle of a QSO,
Right.
you'll drop a lot of packets or be disconnected. So it's very important for your IP address to be stable if you're running a node. In fact, if you're in a situation where it's constantly flickering back and forth, you'll get an email from the system saying you've got a problem.
Right.
What I recommend in that case is either to bind it so that it does not change when you're using Echolink. Sometimes there's a way in your system you can do that, or to try using a proxy, a public proxy, and see if that helps with the problem. As long as that connection remains stable, and it may, since it's a TCP connection, you should be okay. So you might try
Right.
that as an alternative.
Yeah, because I use 3 different firewalls in my home office. I've been in IT for like 55 years, so
Yeah,
security conscious to the T.
yeah.
And yeah, I just have multiple VPNs too that everything hops through to keep everybody out of my system. So it didn't happen, like I said, until I tried to bind Wi-Fi and Ethernet together, and then somebody at Echolink says, "Oh, you're scratchy. We can't read you." I said, "Okay." So let me make an adjustment. So I turned off Wi-Fi and just kept Ethernet, and it was all good. But it's not a big problem because I can turn it back and off as I use Ethernet, or if I'm wanting to use Echolink, or if I want to go back to the scenario. It's pretty easy to turn on and off. I was just kind of wondering if you ever had any issues with that before. Over.
Yeah, that sounds like a problem for VoIP in general. So that sounds like a good solution is to just go with one during the conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate everything you've done with Echolink. So I'll send it back to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. KE2DFA, go ahead.
Okay. I had another question about your program. Basically, I'm a technician, and I know that there's other higher ranks, like there's general and extra. Are there any type of general or extra type? Um, I don't know even know what to call it. Are there any type of general or extra frequencies that Echolink uses, or is it just technician frequencies?
So it's a great question. There are some HF gateways on Echolink. I don't know if they're, what frequencies they're on. But in general, when people have asked me this question, I have always answered it this way, and there might be different interpretations of it. But that the operators and the licensees of the nodes that you're operating through are responsible for the transmissions that go through that node and are under the auspices of the license of whoever is the call sign holder of the node that you're working through. It's almost as if you're third-party traffic in that way. So I never have considered that it's a problem considering the class of license of the person who's connecting to the node. That's an off-the-air connection, which happens to go through the node. And there'd be all kinds of complications, especially if you consider international licensing regulations. If you had to think about what frequencies and bandwidths and modes are operating at the other end of your connection. So I consider that to be the responsibility of the licensee of the node.
Press here.
All right, go ahead, Press.
Oh, thank you. So the East Coast Reflector is a very large AllStar system. It actually has AllStar and IRLP and some digital bridges. And at any given time, we could have literally hundreds of connections at once. As such, we do try to maintain some level of control over things like Roger beeps and courtesy tones and stuff like that. It seems that the Baofangs are coming out of the factory with Roger beep defaulted on, and we ask each user to turn their Roger beep off. The Echolink Android client, I'm not sure if the Apple client, but the Android client also comes with a PTT pre-tone turned on by default. It sounds like whoop. And I'm wondering if you'd consider having that a situation where a user has to opt in rather than the controls operators need to explain to them how to opt out.
Yeah, so I wasn't aware that that sound was being heard over the air. That's only supposed to be played to the Android user. Maybe what's happening is that the microphone opens and picks it up. And it's great that you brought that to my attention. It probably should be off by default.
Thank you.
Thanks, Press. Go ahead, Rob. UQK.
Hi there. I actually raised my hand and I forgot my question. I will. I'll come back when I remember it.
Don't get old like Rob.
Listen, 23, 26 and going strong. I'll tell you what. I'll come back.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Hey, Joe, Jonathan. So to follow up with Press's comment, you're saying that tone or Roger beep that we hear, that's coming from an Android user?
It's the first I've heard of it, and the only guess I have is that it's a there's a couple of optional tones that can signify the beginning and end of a transmission. And it could be that one of those or both of those are being heard over the air when they're not supposed to be. They're not supposed to be sent over the air.
I'm glad you asked that, Press, because I was going to bring that up and kind of forgot.
Oh,
and
it's the old.
Yeah,
and I wasn't even aware that was on by default. I have to check on that.
It is on the Android. I don't know about the Apple, and it's a lot to explain to users. You go into go to the settings, turn it. We just prefer that if it was something that they proactively turned on rather than it was on by default, so that we had to tell them to turn it off.
Right. And I've tried explaining it. It's not on the iOS, so it's like it's not even an option. So, thanks, Jonathan.
That
Thank
tone,
you.
by the way, which is only meant to be heard locally, was suggested by blind operators who weren't sure if they were transmitting or not.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, thank you. We have David, the KE5 XXD, and then we have Dick N8 HG. Go ahead, David.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and good to see everybody on here. Wanted to thank Jonathan also for this system. It's been great. I was thinking I was on like 25 years ago, but if you say 2002, that's fine. I could have
Yeah,
probably
close enough.
in
Yeah.
2001. My first contact was I was in my basement on a PC, and I was talking to a guy on an HT in a mountain in New Zealand, and I was just blown away.
Oh, cool.
So I really loved it. But anyway, one thing I wanted to address is the question about the proxies, the relay direct, and the public. I had no idea what those meant. I would just try
Yeah.
one. If it didn't work, I would go to the next one and keep going through until I got something that would actually stop timing out.
Yeah.
But yeah, we faced some technical issues over the years. We used to have a net, maybe like 10 years ago, we had about 5 or 6 guys, and we'd try to meet an Echolink, and we had some real problems connecting. So we ended up with a man in the middle. It was, the net control was in New Mexico, and we used a guy in South Dakota, man in the middle. We all connected to him, and then everything would work fine. But it got to the point where it stopped working. So we sent the guy to Mexico. I sent him a new router. Another guy sent him a new laptop, and he could never get it working. He just gave up, and now the guy's off Echolink, and he won't use it at all. But this guy in South Dakota was highly technical, and he's a comm guy, and we couldn't figure it out. So there's really no source of technical support. So that's my only drawback with Echolink. Other than that, I love it. My last contact was last weekend. I was talking to my friend in the UK, and he introduced me to a guy in Hawaii on a repeater, connected to him, and I had a chat with a new friend in Hawaii. So it's pretty awesome. So, but like I said, I guess I don't know who we would go to if we needed further technical support, because we don't want to bug you.
Yeah, it's hard. The problem is that, it would be great to have a recipe for configuring everybody's network, but there's so many variations.
Right. Yeah, I had a lot of issues early on with getting the port set up right, getting my port forwarding. I didn't
Every
know the
make
port
and model
forwarding.
of router is different. There's very little. The only thing that comes close to a standard is universal plug and play, and often that's either not present or disabled for security reasons.
Right. I didn't know the port thing was still a requirement, because I don't think I've been setting my ports recently. I thought that had all gone by the wayside.
Yeah, so to some extent, beginning in about 2007, the software became a little bit more firewall friendly, in the sense that, well, there's a couple of things that happen. If it's an Echolink to Echolink connection, you're much more likely to not have issues with port forwarding. The reason for that is that the Echolink software sends certain heartbeat messages to the server. It's a little bit hard to explain, but it keeps the flows open in the routers at both ends. The problem is that not every platform supports this. For example, the Echolink channel driver on Asterisk doesn't support that capability. So you have some variation into whether port forwarding is actually required on your node. But it is better than it was once, and some of those problems have been solved.
Right.
Now with the emergence of satellite providers like Starlink and cellular providers, like they have LTE modems like Verizon and AT&T and so on, they're not even giving you a public internet address. You're using some kind of a shared address. And we've actually had problems with 2 nodes that came online because they were using the same ISP, and they were both assigned the same public IP address, even though they were several hundred miles apart from each other. So this is opening a whole other can of worms in terms of networking. And this is why many people have started subscribing to VPN services.
Yeah, I guess I should really invest in a VPN. I've got an AllStar node that's currently off the air, but eventually I hope to get that going on Echolink sometime. I know some friends of mine have their AllStar nodes, and they use them on Echolink as well, so that's pretty cool. Thank you very much, and it's been a great night here. Enjoyable.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, David. Go ahead, Dick N8 HG. Dick N8 HG, are you around? We'll come back to him. Anyone else?
I'm here. November 8, hold the golf.
Okay,
Sorry.
no
I thought
problem.
touch screen. Anyway, Jonathan, thanks a million for all your work, what you've done. It's fantastic. It's been a pleasure using Echolink. We have a problem with our system. We are running off an Raspberry Pi. We have a remote location, and it seems that it works for a while and then it stops. On the Raspberry Pi, there's also AllStar, and we can tell from the our remote locations that AllStar is working. If you go into the server itself or the Raspberry Pi itself, it thinks it's working, but yet if you have an iPhone and you try to connect into it through the cell networks, it says cannot connect. I wonder if you have a good name or number or phone number of someone we can contact and do some fault tree debugging on this thing to find out what our actual problem is with our system.
I don't have any names or numbers. There are a couple tools on the system you can try. The best thing is the inbound firewall router test, which is available on the Echolink website. You can put in the call sign and password of the node, and it will test it for you. It'll simulate somebody trying to come in from a random address in the internet to make sure that the node's port forwarding is set up correctly. And this sounds like it could be a case where that is where the problem lies.
Well, you mentioned to the previous caller about if there's almost like an hacking and knacking going on between the device and the server, and if that gets out of whack, you could have problems. It sounds like, and you mentioned port forwarding there. It sounds like maybe that might be some of our issues.
So there is a feature of the Echolink software that helps you avoid the need for port forwarding by keeping flows open into the servers. But to the best of my knowledge, that's not supported on the Raspberry Pi. That's software that was written by somebody else based on some very old versions of the protocol.
Do you have a version that runs on the Raspberry Pi?
I do not.
What are your suggestions for us to go forward with this?
Set up port forwarding in the router correctly, if you possibly can.
Okay, we have a repeater trustee that says that that's been done, but it says it apparently is not working.
Yeah, it just needs to be tested. Again, I would suggest using that test page and make sure that it's working.
That's the inbound router test?
That's right.
Sounds good. We'll do that for sure. Thank you,
Okay.
Jonathan. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
May I pop in with the tail end?
Sure.
My name is Press. Dick, we have come across certain routers that will drop or forget port forwarding. Grab a pencil. I want to tell you about a utility that you can consider installing. It's a UPnP client, and it's called Mini UPnP-C. And that will actually request ports from the router. And you could set that in a cron job to hammer that thing every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes to just refresh those ports. So the tool is called Mini UPnP-C, MINI-UPnP-C, and to install it on your Pi, it's Pacman, Pacman, space, dash, big S little y, like psi, and then it's Mini UPnP-C. So if you need a little more guidance on that, we'll get together offline. But UPnP is a nice tool, especially if your router tends to forget incoming ports.
Just one caveat there is that sometimes routers have UPnP disabled for security reasons. So you need to make sure that it's enabled in the router.
Okay, well, I thank both of you because you've set us in the right direction. Thanks.
And Dick, let me ask you a quick question. What's the call sign of the node you're talking about?
It's a WW8GM.
WW8GM, is it like -L,
Yeah,
-R?
let's see, the Echolink node is 99846.
Okay. Well, I just checked WW8GM-R. It is passing the inbound router test. So possibly there's another issue. And maybe to Press's point, maybe it comes and goes if it loses.
It does. It seems like it can run for a couple days or a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden we can't figure out what the root cause is, what causes the problem.
Yeah,
And
some of that
that's-
router software is very buggy, and I found situations sometimes where you have to reboot, for example, after making a configuration change. And I've also found, to Prez's point, cases where the configuration just gets lost from time to time.
Okay. Somebody mentioned earlier about the different routers. You can have as many as like three different, not routers, but three different servers. And I've been reading online that some of the servers could have problems. We get an error message that says it can't find the server or can't resolve the server.
Yeah.
That could be a configuration problem. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Could be a configuration problem depending on what software you're using.
Okay, yeah, it's let's see here. It's version 1.7-06.
Is that Echolink software?
It's a ham VoIP.
Okay, so ham VoIP is another platform which I can't speak to. You might need to contact the author of that software to see if he can help you with that.
Okay. And did you also write the AllStar version of the software?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, okay. So that's another group.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coming on board late in the game here, it's like there's a lot of data out there and
Yeah.
a lot of names being thrown around. It's like it's hard to put it all together. So, but
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time tonight.
Okay.
Hey, if I can jump in here real quick, Dick, this is Ben from Toledo.
Yes, Ben.
Did you check and make sure that port was changed from 222 to whatever you guys came up with on that router?
I talked to our trustee. You know who that is? I don't want to say his name. I don't have permission to say his name, but he said it was changed. So I don't know.
Okay, and you guys are still getting that list of that IPs trying to basically get access to that node then?
Exactly. Yeah. It basically can't find, I think it's server4ecolink.org.
All right. Well,
There
I'll check.
actually is no such server, so that would be the reason.
Well,
that's why we're missing it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Dick, I'll check tomorrow and double check that's been changed, and I'll reach out to you.
Okay, appreciate that.
Yes,
you got
sir.
my phone number and call sign?
Yep, sure do.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Ben, real fast, are you familiar with fail2ban? FAIL2BAN?
No.
Okay, that's a good tool if you're getting hammered by SSH attempts. Fail2ban will actually log the guy's IP address and put him in a black hole if he keeps trying to bust in.
Well, that's the GM's problem. They just are getting hit. I mean, one after another, and it's
Right, but
locking up
if you have a SSH port open and your little pie is getting hammered, you can put fail2ban in the pie and at least mitigate your problem.
So what does that do? Is that actually just log 4 or 5 entries and locks them out?
Yep.
Okay. It's called fail2ban.
Fail2ban, FAIL2BAN. It's all the digit 2, FAIL2BAN.
Okay, we'll look into that. Okay, super.
Thanks, Press.
And again, thanks everybody for help.
All right, thank you, Dick, for the question. Before we continue with the questions, I just want to check with Dick, WB2, JPQ, and Jonathan to see how we are doing with time.
Well, we've got all night, Joe. I just while I got it here, I just want to say one thing, Jonathan. Of course, great presentation, but of all the things you said tonight, I hope everybody paid attention to one thing: mic in front of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
We have users that come into the East Coast Reflector, and after tonight, we're going to start banning them because we don't want poor audio. Some of these people on their iPads 3 feet away, there's no excuse for it.
Yeah. Headsets.
We strive on good audio, and our Echolink users are taking the system down because there are excellent Echolink users, and then there are people that just don't care. And the don't care people are just not going to be able to get onto the East Coast Reflector. They need to take pride in their audio. But of anything you said tonight, put the microphone in front of your mouth. If people would just remember that, we'd be in great shape.
Great point.
Here,
I will have to sign off in a few minutes, but I can take another question.
Okay, one last question.
I have something I wanted to mention about the chat room. The font is so small. If there was some way to make it a little larger, that would be really good because it compared to everything else on the console, the font stays really tiny on a larger monitor.
Yeah, I've heard that comment before. Are you running version 2.3? Is it downloaded within the last couple of years?
The last download was a couple of days.
Okay. So this is version 2.3 of the Echolink software for Windows. I just want to make sure we're talking about that.
I'd have to pull it up now, and there isn't enough time to check. It's got to be the most recent. It was on the top of the page when I downloaded it.
All right, that's fine. Yeah, so it is supposed to be a little bit more friendly for large monitors. If again, it should be sensitive to the font size settings in Windows, so you can make, every Windows application have larger fonts from the Windows control panel, and it will respect that setting. If, however, you're noticing fine fonts everywhere else and just the Echolink font is too small, that may not be an easy problem to solve.
Okay, so there is probably a way, but I'm more or less on my own there. That's okay. I mean,
yeah, you might try just increasing the font size across all applications in the Windows settings and see if that helps.
Yeah, I was wondering if, I might get into the console myself and make the change, in the code, but I don't. I don't know what problems I run into if I even try to do it that way, but it had crossed my mind.
Mind if I take a fifth?
Yeah, go ahead, Bress.
All right, real quick. Jonathan, could you discuss what SVX Link is? I've heard of that recently, and I didn't know how it fits into the Echolink world.
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. It's not software that I developed. It's a Linux-based Echolink compatible app, which either runs in single user mode or in sysop mode. But it is a native Linux application that was written for that platform, and it's largely compatible with Echolink. It's not real friendly to the servers, but it does work. And there's a fair number of nodes up and running in it, especially in Europe. And I think they've been running for many years. So that's certainly an option on the Linux platform.
Thank you.
Had a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
Jonathan, thank you again. It was a great presentation. I just got to know, were you the author for the Android, the iOS, the Windows, all those different platforms? Did you write the software for all of them yourself? Because if you did, that's incredible.
Yes, I did. The iOS and Android apps look like they were designed by an engineer. So I'm not a great user interface person, but yeah, I did all four of the platforms.
Did you use Java or JavaScript, I think, or whatever they use for Android, or did you do it in C or something? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the Windows editions are written in C++ using the Microsoft Foundation classes. The iOS edition is written in Objective-C. The Android edition is written in Java. And the web version is written in JavaScript and Java.
That's incredible. You're awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, it's been a pleasure joining everybody tonight, and I appreciate the great questions and the interest.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. We really appreciate you coming on here, and we do appreciate all of our Echolink users. Like I say, we're just trying to get the audio cleaned up.
Yeah.
Now the latest fad on the East Coast Reflector is the wireless Bluetooth star sets, and put them on and you hear background noise. It's getting terrible. People need to take pride in their audio. And for the most part, they do, but we've got stragglers, Jonathan, that just, don't care, basically. They just don't care what they sound like.
Well, I would say take advantage of the Echolink test server. You can
Absolutely.
connect to it and you can hear
Absolutely.
what your audio sounds like
Absolutely.
exactly.
I mean, we run 300, we run 300 nodes all day long. I mean, that's a lot. And you
Sure.
get somebody that comes in with bad audio.
Yeah.
There's 299 people are just shaking their head. And we get complaints all the time. Do something about this guy. Well, but that's not your problem. That's our problem. But like I said, tonight, microphone in front of your mouth. That was the biggest point that you made tonight, as far as I was concerned. But thanks again. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. So long, Dick, and everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, brother.
Thanks, Jonathan.
I forgot to ask him if he has
Oh,
forgot to ask him if he has a contribution button, because I know those servers take a lot of money.
On our website.
There is on their website?
Yes,
Okay.
there is.
Cool.
And there is one on the East Coast Reflector website too.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Rumor has it.
I think we had what did you say, Vicky? 121 tonight. That's a lot of people.
Can I add a comment?
I thought you said 82, and I said 82. Remember, Dick?
That's a moving target.
hey, if I can just jump in here real quick. Hey, Dick from Detroit, are you still in here? I see you're in here, but are you monitoring? Hey, don't run off. I have Nick logging into that and double checking that SSH port for you.
I appreciate that very much, Ben.
Yep.
And
Sorry, guys.
If anyone's interested in watching this video again, just you can find it on our YouTube. East
Great
Coast
video.
Reflector.
Great video. And it's a great presentation. It was just, I'll tell you, it was one of the better ones. And for those who would like to give good advice for people using the cell phones, you could buy an adapter that goes from USB-A down to whatever the gender of the phone takes. And the MPOW noise canceling headset works beautiful on it.
Absolutely.
Oh, great. Great news.
All right. So wait, hang on. You're talking about plugging a headset into your phone.
Yes.
Using an OTG cable, and the phone recognizes it?
Yes,
that's amazing.
Does. Yes.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Wow. What's
it
the
also
push
works good. It also works good with the DVSwitch client.
Okay. What's the push to talk scenario in that?
I don't know if you're able to activate the PTT, but I know it is compatible for voice purpose.
Okay, I'm just wondering because I know the MPOW, when you plug it into an AllStar node, the volume down is your push to talk. And I don't know if
I don't think that works, Press. I've never been able to make mine work that way.
You just use the
Still got to use the bar on the Android.
Yeah.
You just use
okay. So you're still using the phone to control send and receive. You're just talking through the headset.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
I gotta tell you guys,
you get much better audio.
It works on phone calls too.
I got a Bluetooth push button thing for like the camera, and I hooked it up to the PTT, and it worked perfectly.
No kidding.
Not all are alike though.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
If you're going to do Bluetooth, you got to make sure you use a noise canceller. You got to make sure it's compatible with the device.
All it is a button. Just that's it. Like
yeah, there are two different things. He's talking about push to talk control, where he's remapping the
you
camera.
can do that in some applications.
Exactly.
Yeah, the application has to be expecting and say, what do we want to consider the push to talk? Oh, the camera button. Okay, fine. Yep, that's cool.
Yeah, works good.
Hey, Dick, N8HG, that SSH port has not changed.
That's good news. I was told it was changed, so I will talk to our trustee and find out why. Because of the location, it's hard to get up there. I mean, it's a a 4-hour trip. Just go up there and look at the equipment and come back. So it's definitely a remote location. As
don't-
you know, you were there.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget X-ray of the vehicle.
Okay.
Well, while we got you, Dick, like I was going to ask you this afternoon while I was talking to you, what can we do about getting that GM node connected a little bit more often to the East Coast Reflector? We get constant emails, people asking us